like starting out, what I've been trying to do generally is just kind of bridge Chinese medicine concepts, right? The sort of Taoist, these ideas that came from more observation of the macroscopic world, right? Like the ecological interconnections between nature, the elements of nature, and then how that formed this whole basis for traditional Chinese medicine thought, and then try to bring that through to today into the biomedical kind of, microscopic analysis of life as we have it, breaking it down. But one of the concepts that was, I really liked was that from that early Taoist perspective, there was this kind of, if you look at a person, they have all four of these elements or aspects present, right? You have the spiritual part, you've got the mind, the mental part, you've got the emotional part, and you've got the physical. And if you think about all those, the physical, of course, is what we really deal with most of the time now. When you go to the doctor, we're dealing with the physical part. And if you went to study Chinese medicine, like some of you have, you get this idea that, wow, I mean, every pathological condition we look at, it's always like, well, emotions, like people that have frustration, people that are angry, people that are depressed, people that are worried, people that starts to be a big part of the picture. So you start to see that it's not just a physical, experience or a physical presentation. It's actually deeply tied to the emotions. And then as you start to go into clinical practice and you see how that plays out, you're like, oh my gosh, wow, it really is. Life really is oceans of emotions, and it is all the issues in the tissues. That really is real. That's happening. And then you go here to the mental part, what do we do with our mind? How are we thinking? How are we overthinking or underthinking? If we're worried, all the things that we do with our mind start to have a huge influence on these other elements. And then we go to this part, and this part, I felt like last night was really sweet. We had some native folks here doing some prayers. We did some cleansing. We kind of opened up the spiritual part and the spiritual medicine and the spiritual care aspect of healthcare, right? And if you don't address all four of these levels, you're not able to achieve the same kind of, healing effect with people. And so I just thought I'd throw that up there while we're kind of still getting this all dialed in there. But for me, this whole concept, spirit, mind, emotion, physical, is really beautiful and really important to keep in mind. And just even just having this little map in your mind as you're thinking about how you're working with people, I think it helps a lot. And spiritual care is a hard one to define, but people having some meaning in their life, something that connects them to spirit, that connects them to the meaning of life. There's this purpose for them to be here, that it's not just some sort of random conglomeration of molecules that all just sort of got together to become you. Like, that's not spirit. That's not a spiritual experience. Spiritual experience is where you're connected to your ancestry. You're connected to the, all the different aspects of life that have come through to today, and that your life has purpose. You have meaning within this bigger orchestration. So I just want to kind of throw that up there. It's just like a thing that I think is really useful and cool, is that sort of 4-part look at the human being. Okay, so this is the essence genetics parallel. And this is about talking about the Taoist or Chinese medicine concept of essence. If you're not familiar with that, you're going to be after this. And then how that looks very similar to the idea of genetics, just that we use different language to talk about them. Both concepts have the same basic relationship to health, aging, and eventually mortality. So we're going to look at that. So just a quick thing on the human genome, right? A genome is the complete set of DNA, the deoxyribonucleic acid. Over 3 billion base pairs, right? This was the whole Human Genome Project. It's to map this whole thing out so we have that information. And this is the coolest thing, is that at least 99.5% of the genes are identical between any two humans on the planet. That's pretty cool, right? Like, we always talk about how we all have these different genes, right? But we're really, and when it comes down to like bacteria and plants and everything else, we all share vastly the same DNA. Life works in a very similar way across all kinds of different families and classes and species. So we're not that far apart from everyone else. That's why, we love plants so much, because we share all this DNA with plants. We don't share DNA with statin drugs, but we do with all these plants. So genetics and genomics are two different terms. People talk about them a lot. I just wanted to kind of break it out. Genetics is the study of genes and their roles in inheritance in an individual, right? So like someone like has sickle cell anemia or cystic fibrosis, these are genetic predisposing factors that will make it very likely that you're going to have one of these conditions. And then there's SNPs, which we always talk about in medicine, single nucleotide polymorphisms, which are the way that genes function, right? It's not like you replace the gene, but that gene's either turned on or off. It's functioning at a high level, and it's not just on or off. The genes actually have different functional attributes. And so some SNPs will do things halfway or part way, and it changes the way that you metabolize the life experience as a person, right? So that makes you an individual. So genetics, right? That's genetics. And then genomics is sort of like looking at people in general, the whole genome. And if you look at a person's genome, you can see sort of, why someone might get sick from a certain infection, or why they're really sensitive to environmental toxins where someone else isn't, even certain behaviors. And then you have these things called haplotypes where there's like groups of genes together. But then we start looking at that as looking at how genomics affects the individual. And the point I want to make with this is just that genes are not expressed in a vacuum, right? Your genes are expressed in an environment. They're in a constant dialogue with the environment around you, with the people that you live with, your family, the village, your community, with nature, with the microbes, with the animals, the plants. Everything around you is acting as an environmental connection, as a pressure or as a support for your genes, and altering how they function. So when we talk about that, the term today is epigenetics. Epigenetics is the interface between your genes and the world you live in. And epigenetics is, it's a really beautiful branch of science now that's become, of biology really, that's become, fascinating for so many people. And you see here, the reason why a skin cell is different from a brain cell or a muscle cell is because as those cells are expressing themselves, good morning, come on in, they're interacting with the environment, and the environment is putting pressure on those genes, and it's changing what those genes are going to make, how they're going to express themselves. And when they express themselves in one way, they're a skin cell. When they express themselves another way, they're a muscle cell or a brain cell. That's epigenetics, really, that's defining what a cell is going to do, or how it's going to shape itself. It's really about epigenetics, the pressures from the environment in which the genes are expressed. Does everybody follow that? It's all basic stuff, right? Kind of like microbiome stuff. So we all kind of get it, right? Good. Okay. So there's lots of different processes in that epigenome, and how the epigenetics works as this environmental pressure affects the genes. Methylation, right? The donation of methyl groups to the genes. And methylation is very important for DNA replication. So methylation and methylating compounds, you think about your B vitamins, think about TMG, think about choline, lots of methyl donors that show up in the body and help with this DNA replication process. Well, in our environment, DNA methylation is one of those places where we alter the way the genes are expressed. We'll talk about histones and histone modification. Histones are really cool. And they're really good in cancer to understand too, because there's things called histone deacetylases, where they deacetylate the histones. And we're going to talk about them a little bit, but I'll just give you like the overview is just that if you take information today and it's on your hard drive, it's really hard to get it from one place to another because it's so much information, right? So what do? We put it in a zip drive, right? We compress that information into a smaller amount, really stick it together, and then we can use that to, hey, here's a disk, take this and then put it in your computer, then you can open it up again. Well, that's kind of what histones do. They compress the DNA, they weave it together so that it's close together, and it can be all held in a smaller package, and you can share that information with another person or another part of the body. And then RNA interference is just the way that certain proteins will interfere with the way that RNA translates the information from the nucleus to the DNA. These are some of the main ways that we can observe how the environmental impacts act at the genetic level. So just taking this one step further, the genotype is the map of your genes, and then the phenotype is how you look, what you look like, what's the expression of you. That's the cellular level. It's at the organism level, the organ level, anything. So, environmental exposures lead to phenotypical expression. Environmental pressure alters the genotype, and then it is passed on. So one thing you can do is that if you have certain environmental pressures that affect the genes, not only does that change you in your life, if you have offspring, those offspring will also carry those genetic changes. And this is how we interact with the world, right? I don't know if you guys remember back with Darwin, he had this concept about natural selection, right? And that there was this survival of the fittest idea, and that there was this mutation happening all the time, and that certain mutations would give advantages to an individual. That individual would survive and pass on those advantages to its offspring. And there was a whole, kind of a big court case and a challenge between this guy Lamarck and Darwin. And Lamarck's thought was, hey, if a giraffe is out in the forest and or out the plains, and it's reaching up to try and reach some leaves in a tree, over time, as it stretches its neck, it's going to actually change the way that it passes on its genes to its children, because that's its environmental connection, that it's actually stretching for that material, and that in that stretching, that's creating an epigenetic change that's actually changing what's happening at the DNA, and then the offspring are going to have longer necks. And they were like, nah, it's not true. This is not. Darwin's right. It's random mutation. The one that gets the mutation that gives it the longer neck, that one survives. The other ones die. Well, unfortunately, it came out that way that Darwin won that discussion. But in truth, now that we understand epigenetics and we understand genetics a lot better, we know that it's both. They're both right. We do influence our genes by our choices. And with the human being and with health, it's about lifestyle choices. But what you choose to do or not do, what you eat and not eat, what you think and not think, that actually changes the way your genes function, and then you pass it on. It's very cool stuff. So here it is, genotype. The genes express themselves, and there's the epigenome, right? The pressures, and then you have the phenotype, right? And that's who you are. That's how you get expressed. Nurture, nature, right? That's what we're talking about. Modifications, dietary exposure to chemicals, anything that interferes with the DNA can affect all the normal physiology and can affect things like cancer, your risks for cancer. And that's the thing, like we see so much. We're going to look at how somatic mutations, which is the majority of what we see in DNA that relates to cancer and like risk of cancer and other diseases, is actually stuff that you gain or change through your life. Very little of it is actually coming from what's called a germline mutation, where there's a mutation that occurred in the DNA that you have as your haploid cells, like the sperm or the egg. If they contain already a DNA change, an alteration or a mutation that makes you susceptible to a disease like a cancer, that's only 5 to 10% of the cancers that we'll see. The rest of it's all somatic changes that are made by the choices made by your ancestors and the people that control the environment in which you live and shape it so that it changes how your risks are. You know what I'm saying? Understand what I'm saying? Is that complex? We'll get through it a little more. So I wanted to talk about this idea, digital information versus analog, where digital is the DNA. It can be extremely accurate. You get a perfect copy, like your hard drive, right? You're born, you get this hard drive of information. This right here is 3 cells. Boom. This is exactly who you were at the moment of conception. Analog is then, okay, those genes are then put not in the vacuum, not over here in the scientific concept of the perfect, DNA hard drive, but they're actually put over here inside of this turning, interfacing soup of reality. And that's affecting how the genes are going to actually express the proteins that they code for. So the idea is that if the genome were a computer, the epigenome would be the software, right? And I talk about histones that loop the chromatin together like garden hoses. If it's too tight, you can't read it. If it's too loose, it takes up too much space. So it has to be just right. So this guy, David Sinclair, he wrote a book called Why We Age and Why We Don't Have to. He's kind of like one of these guys that thinks that if we just keep figuring stuff out, we're going to live a lot longer and we're going to live healthier longer. And eventually we maybe don't have to die, or maybe we live to be 250 years old or something like that. But that's kind of his idea. Being a geneticist, they're really trying to figure this out, because the whole idea that in all these traditions, there's this quest for immortality, right? The human being, we just need to get over this disease of aging, right? Aging is a disease. Yeah. No, go ahead. No. Yeah, not. Well, I'm just gonna let that stand because that was beautiful. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Yeah, Paracelsus. I love it. And I think, one of the things is that there's 2 things that makes me think of. One is there's an idea like give back, right? And I think part of like having the realization that this land has been inhabited by peoples forever. There's David Winston walking out here, but people, have lived here forever, and a lot of them are gone. And a lot of the records, hey David, a lot of the record of them are gone. But that in reality, they're here and they're here now. And the idea that, this death and dying thing, and that we should try to not die, or that we should live long, it's a very selfish thing, right? Like that my consciousness should live on because I have the thing that will help the world, or it will support the people that I want to support. That's a pretty interesting concept, right? And one that I think is pretty foreign to most native cultures. I don't think that they think that way. I don't think it's about living longer, about me finding a way to not die. It's about accepting the natural process of life and death and being totally good with that, and then giving yourself back, right? And then the other thing is like, this death and dying is a mystery, right? It's something that we don't understand. Nobody's gone out there and come back. Somebody might tell you that they know the guy who went there and comes back, and you can wear the t-shirt that says, you know, the guy who went there and did the thing, and then you could get people to follow you. But we don't know the guy who went there and came back. I've never seen that guy, right? So that mystery is that's the juice. That's what makes it all so cool and so worth it. If I knew what was going to happen, I'd want to do this. I don't think so. David, 2 cents, 1 cent. God, I love that guy. Okay, good. Okay, great. So we're going to switch now from that kind of scientific concept into the essence concept, right? This is an old Taoist concept. And when you're thinking about conception, fertility, the ability to reproduce ourselves, it requires this essence to be in order. We have to have enough of it. And you need an abundant supply of blood and essence. You need flourishing of the kidney and liver. You got to have a healthy Chong and Ren vessels. These are like the conception vessels, the sea of blood. And you need to have this blood and essence as the yin aspect, the material that holds it all together. And then you also have to have the yang energy, like what you were just saying, having the yang as well, to be able to bring the ministerial fire, the spark that brings the kinetic part of the blood and essence into becoming a being that is going to express itself. And all of these models we're looking at, whether it's the genetics or it's the essence, it has to be perfect. And there's this one moment that you could be created in this exact moment, just of you. But then you are, of course, born into the context of your life, and that shapes you beyond that. And you can make choices to alter how that goes, which you're thinking back to your ancestors and the choices they make to bring you here. And then how can you alter the choices you make to make it better for the offspring that you're bringing, the people you're bringing through. So here we go. So the idea that I'm saying, essence is this concept. And what it says is that there's this intangible material. There's this stuff that we're all made of. And that when you're born, you have a certain amount of it, a finite amount of it. It's enough to make you every day for a certain amount of time. And throughout your life, you can change how fast it's being used up. You can slow down the use of your essence, the amount of energy it takes to make you every day. Because if you don't sleep at all and you stay up and you take methamphetamine every day, your essence is going to go real quick. You see that in people that do these things, that heavy-duty stimulant users. We'll look at that a little more closely. But the idea here is that if essence is this material that's used up through your lifetime, as we get older, we don't have as much of it. And the choices we make about what we eat, how we digest the experience, the emotional experience we have, are we able to digest the emotional part of life, or are we stuck? Our mind, what are we thinking about? Are we worried all the time? Are we relaxed and present in the now? And then the spirit, does our life have purpose and meaning? If all those things are aligned and together, the idea is that you can preserve your essence and it can last a long time. And if you aren't in alignment, you can burn that up really fast. But on the other side of it, when you think about genetic integrity, and I love this idea, genetic integrity is the idea that at some point, imagine your essence was depleted, but let's go back to the gene model and say, the genes now I'm not able to get a good copy of that record that I had when I was born. Because in that interface with the world around me, the surface got scratched. Every time I copy that DNA, it's like the disc, like when you got the CD, oh, cool, I play it, I'm like, darn, my favorite part of that song, it always skips, Well, a lot of skips start building up over time in life. And this is where we look at the difference between the two models, but the similarity also. Although each individual is conceived with a finite amount of essence, it is the interaction with the surrounding environment that determines how the essence will be depleted. I love this yin-yang right here. There's so many cool like yin-yang models out there now. It's like, I just love how people just keep elaborating on the same concept, the dark and the light. And then, of course, inside the deepest dark is light, and inside the deepest light is dark. And that's what we need. You've got to have that perfect balance. And so we start thinking about this essence idea and, that lay it with the genetics and keep both of them in your mind. think about this, that in Chinese medicine, in the kidney network houses the essence. And when we're, just at conception, people that study that embryology, you'll see that the kidneys are formed really, really early. They open in the ears. The ears are formed very early. There's a microsystem in the ears for representing all the different parts of the body. The neurological network, right? The bone marrow, the marrow that makes the bone, and then the nerve tissue. That's all part of that kidney essence system. It's really deep stuff. The neuroendocrine system in the brain. This is what kidney essence represents in our life today. And so when we get into kidney essence deficiency, the breakdown of that essence, we'll see what the symptoms look like, okay? And in the spiritual aspect, right? Like I said before, what's that? I don't know what happens after I die. There's this unknown there. What came before? What comes after? And I could live in a place of fear, right? But that place of fear is going to do what? It's going to burn up my essence faster. But I can live in a place of acceptance and wonder and magic. And that will help me keep my essence longer. Part of that magic makes the essence more full. So here's what I call the kidney essence adrenal network. We always talk about the adrenal glands, right? Adrenal insufficiency, adrenal deficiency. And this is the idea. The adrenal gland is really the suprarenal gland. It sits on top of the kidney. And I always think of it as a control center for how much essence we're going to use, right? Think about what the adrenal does, right? The adrenal cortex makes cortisol, cortisone, right? Our main stress hormones. The adrenal medulla makes the catecholamines. It makes our dopamine, norepinephrine, epinephrine, adrenaline, right? And when you have a really intense experience, how many times have you seen this with people, the kid runs out in the street, the mom's like, jump out of the car, and she just like gets a burst of strength and energy, gets her kid, or the car falls and she lifts the car off, pulls the kid out, and then like a streak of white goes in her hair. It's like she used so much essence in that moment to change an outcome that she actually like took some years off of her life, or some days, or whatever it would be. And that's kind of how it is. And we think about memory too, right? When you remember an event when you were a little kid, most of the time it's because that event was very powerful. Why? Because it was something that either was super joyful and you had this flood of dopamine as catecholamine, or it was really intense and you had a lot of epinephrine. But those outputs of essence create an imprint on your memory, in your mind, of what that event was. And you'll remember it for the rest of your life. It has to do with how much essence was given to that moment. So what happens when the kidney's essence is deficient? Well, thinning hair, alopecia, the teeth start to fall out, a lot of dental cavities, you get dizziness, you don't have a good lift of energy, you don't have essence up to the mind, to the brain, loss of memory, neurological decline. This is stuff we're talking about this weekend, right? This whole weekend was really about, cognitive impairment and aging and neurodegeneration. So essence being a main place that we can affect change in this process of aging, and whether we do it gracefully or whether we do it, in a way that's not such a beautiful outcome for us. Low back pain, the kidney rules the low back and the knees, weakness of the low back and knees, the lower limbs. Always think about that. When people are like, oh yeah, my knees, I got a knee injury. No, it's like, think about how it connects to the kidney. The kidney really holds the energy of the low back, and that's the connecting point from the legs to the torso, a very important place for us for all of our movement, all the things that we do in life. And the knees are really essential too. And then the bones, osteopenia, osteoporosis. So you've got to get back to the essence level of support if we're going to help change outcomes with aging. And remember, it's not about the amount of time you live, it's how well you live, right? It's a health span. I don't really care if I live to be 100 or I live to be 80. I just want to make sure that I'm feeling good. And if I'm not feeling good at some point, I'd rather it be a cultural thing where we say, hey, you're not feeling good? There's no way, it's not going to turn around. It's just going to go down from here. Well, what do you want to do? Well, I think I'm good. Let's say goodbye and we see move on. That would be really cool if that's how our culture saw it. But it's not. It's like, I'm going to hang on. There's going to be some change. I can't let go. That whole thing. Where we spend most of our money in healthcare, almost all of it, like with something like, I don't know what the percentage is anymore, but it's a huge amount of our healthcare expenses the last 2 years of life. We just pour our money into interventions to keep people alive, even when they're not really, it's not going to turn them around. They're not going to go back and have a young life. We're not going to do that. So attrition is this idea that just over time, right? The process of gradually reducing the strength or effectiveness of something over time. This is where I'm saying the disc is getting damaged. The copy is constantly being scratched. And then you don't have enough information. The information is not complete enough to make a full copy, or when that amount of essence isn't enough, sufficient to make you again, that's when you have disease. And this is why cancer rates are so much more, they're so much higher when we're aging, because we can't make a clear copy. They have mutation that starts occurring. And we'll see how the mutation starts to occur in really key areas, like in genes that are tumor suppressor genes that are designed to basically make sure that the copy we're about to make doesn't have any errors in it. Like P53, basically the guardian of the genome. If that P53 gene is mutated through one of these processes, through the environmental pressures, that gene no longer does its job. Well, that's a really important job, to make sure there aren't any mutations that are going to get through to the next copy. When that starts to get mutated, then the amount of mutations amplifies. And when you get enough mutations, it's not just like it's a little different. It becomes this whole neoplasm, something that actually is on its own, growing separately from the you that you want to be. DNA repair, right? This is kind of like the yin aspect of energy manufacture. You've got to protect the DNA. We've always got to repair the mistakes. We've got to protect it. This is where we talk about the yin element, whereas the yang element is making energy and just generating the force to create new you. There's this constant process of making sure the you is good, making sure you got your lunch packed, making sure that you got your warm clothes on, you got your water bottle, right? That's the yin element. The mom sending the kid up to school, whereas the dad's like, let's go get it together. Boom, we're gonna make new you. Mitochondria. Just want to put this up because there's, like I said on Monday, there's like something like 2,500 mitochondria in many cells, not just one, like they show you in the science book. You go between 1,000 and 2,500 mitochondria per cell. Super important. They have their own DNA. If we go back, this is like an old, the idea is that the mitochondria were a bacteria, and they found a really cool symbionts with us, and we share now. We keep them safe. They make us energy. And they have their own DNA, and they have their own DNA protective mechanisms. But DNA breakdown through all those DNA damaging processes will actually inhibit the mitochondria from working efficiently, and you won't have energy manufacture that's good, and you also won't be able to protect yourself from the cost of burning fuels in this world that we live in. We live in an oxygen-rich world. That's beautiful. But if you don't quench the free radicals that you generate every time you make energy, you break down. Right? Reactive oxygen species. Adaptive capacity, right? You have to be able to adapt. We need cell membrane integrity. We've got to resist breakdown and subsequent damage to the nucleus and the mitochondrial DNA. That's what we need to do. So when we're supporting essence, the essence nourishing herbs, they do this. They help us prevent that damage from occurring. I mentioned somatic mutations. This is the stuff I was saying before. This is happening through your life. It's the changes that are occurring, damaging, like I mentioned, like if you get a mutation in the gene that relates to more mutations, that relates to, you eat something, have a cancer. Very different than a germline mutation, which is literally something that was passed on and is inside of, the genes that you gave to your kid directly. These germline variants are only 5 to 10% of all cancers that occur. But these do occur, and you have a pretty good record of them at this point. Polymorphisms versus mutations, right? Mutations are rare. Polymorphisms are the most common thing, and these are the SNPs that we all talk about, right? Single nucleotide polymorphisms. Changes in the way that the genes function. They make what they normally would make. They make a little bit of it. They not make much of it. And polymorphisms are really interesting because they function in groups and they function together as a whole bioregulatory network. So when we try to look at one single gene and say, hey, do you have that SNP? Like, oh, well, then you need to do this. Like, well, why is that SNP altered? Why is that one change represented in my body? It's not in a vacuum. That one change is a part of all kinds of interrelated connective changes. The body's doing things for a reason. You don't just have a SNP that changes and it's just there. It's a random thing. We can just fix it or, approach it as a single target. No, we need to see it within the context of the bigger network that it's a part of because it has purpose. The body does things for a reason. Homozygous, heterozygous, right? Homozygous means you have, both of the alleles on a gene are altered. And in that case, whatever that effect is, it's much higher than if you're heterozygous. You have one of each, right? I'm going to kind of go over that with you guys. And then if you look at the way that we evaluate genetics today, we often look at these SNPs, but you really don't want to just do that. You want to look at the patient's symptom picture, right? We want to get the person's full intake. We want to understand them at the macroscopic level, understand the biomarkers, take in all the information about them. And then if you get the SNP information, that's great. That's great. But don't think of it as like, I'm going to look at the genes and then I'm going to start, helping people. Right? It's like dot to dot or something. Oh, I look at the genes. Oh, you have this. Okay, we'll give you MTHF. You've got the MTHFR gene. You need this stuff. Oh, you've got this MTR. We should give you this. That's like really not high level medicine. There's little bits that we can learn inside of it, but we have to do the multi-targeted approach. And that's where botanical medicine is so beautiful because it weaves with us. Like I said earlier, it's familiar to us. We share the DNA, we share the genetics, and the herbs literally do things that are complex that we can't do, that we don't understand, but we can use those principles, hot, cold, wet, dry, damp, all the things that we use to think about how herbs work. They're yin, they're yang, they're heating, they're cooling, they're upward moving, they're downward moving. We enter these networks. That stuff actually allows us to apply the herbs and let them do the work of complex bioregulatory systems approach to the whole body. Some important SNPs. You probably have seen some of these. It's like alphabet soup, methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase, those apolipoproteins we were talking about yesterday, right? Release that she had the ApoE4. She said she was at risk for, late onset Alzheimer's. These are things that, again, these can predict risk. CBS, that's a cystathione beta synthase. That's a sulfur-related gene. COMT, catechol methyltransferase, relates to how you break down the catecholamines. Some people break them down really fast. Some people break them down really slow. That's a different type of stress response, right? MAO, monoamine oxidase. Do you break down, do you actually break down those amines, those nitrogen-rich, really powerful neurotransmitters, or do they hang around for a long time, keep stimulating you? Metabolism, vitamin D, blood rheology factors like factor V Leiden and von Willebrand's. These are predictors for having clotting events, for people at risk of strokes and having events that could be thromboembolic and life-threatening. So one of the things we have is this idea of homocysteine. Folks, you see that, right? A lot. You guys look at homocysteine in your patients, that marker. Yeah, it's a really good one, right? It's, it's one of these places we could affect change. And people normally what they do is they just go, okay, we have that. We'll give you, methyl tetrahydrofolate, and that'll bring it down. But in reality, it's more complex than that. And it's nice to work with the plants, again, to direct their whole physiology, change it with the plants. And then you can apply some of the stuff inside of it, like MTF, THF, or other things. And this is just a quick look at the homocysteine pathway. You see, I don't know if I have a pointer here. I don't think this thing does that one. Oh, there it is. Good. Yeah, right there. So you can see here's homocysteine inside of this cycle. These cycles are kind of cool. This is from the Sterling's app. This is on the MTHFR support website. If you're ever looking at SNPs stuff, I really like this website. It does a really good job of kind of breaking it down for each part of the metabolic process. They give you these different genes, and for each person, they'll say, okay, you have this alteration, it's homozygous, or it's heterozygous here or here. And you can look at this and go, oh, it looks like this is how it's all put together. But I don't want you guys to have to remember this. I mean, there is a quiz, but don't worry, you'll be fine. This is the homocysteine is right in here, and it's part of methionine metabolism. Methionine is this main protein that we get from meat and nuts and things. We bring in methionine, and there's this metabolic pathway through methionine that relates to all these other pathways. And if we start making a lot of this homocysteine, and this is, again, mostly dependent on those SNPs, but also on our lifestyle choices, we'll start to have problems that relates to inflammation primarily in the cardiovascular system, homocysteine. And, the data between homocysteine levels being high and people having higher levels of mortality and increased morbidity are really clear. I'll show you some of that. Homozygous. If you have a homozygous, like if you were homozygous for MTHFR right here, here's MTRR in this one particularly. If you're homozygous for one of these, it means that in the case, I think it's in MTHFR specifically, a heterozygous allele, meaning one of them is altered. You're about 70% of the normal metabolism of folic acid into its metabolite, methyl tetrahydrofolate. And if you're homozygous, you only do about 30%. So either you need a lot more of the folic acid to get that same amount, or you need to help your body by reducing it before you get there. Now, if we understood it more, in depth, we probably know how to better and better make the body do a better job at metabolizing it, because before we had the products of MTHF you could just buy off the shelf, we would just give people lots of folic acid and it would push through, like saturate all their receptors and all their pathways, and they'd make more of it. But that's not the best way. I think it's better that we have the reduced forms. So sulfur metabolism, see people have these sulfur sensitivities now. People have oxalate sensitivities now. People have all these, things that are coming up, right? With metals, molds, infections, things like Lyme, underlying viral infections, long COVID, you name it, environmental toxicity. People get into these multiple hypersensitivity situations where they react to everything, right? And that to me gets back to this like depletion of your ability to quench and deal with the toxicity over time. And then it depletes that essence of the adrenal network to the point where you're just not able to mount a really strong settling and stabilizing effect on your immune system. So it easily gets out of control. It starts to flare up. It's like little fires get going and you can't put them on anymore. You lost the ability. One of the ways I see essence oftentimes is like, if I have a fire that gets started, do I have plenty of resources to go ahead and just put the fire out, put it done? Cool, it's done. Did its job, now it's out. Or do I not? If I don't have resources to do that, the fire keeps burning. And when the fire keeps burning, there's big consequences. Things start to break down, fall apart, pain, suffering, all the itises, right? Any itis and then autoimmune disease. But people start to have sulfur sensitivities. And you can see it here. It's just like you see the sulfur metabolism, homocysteine. People have like a lot of this CBS. They'll drain the homocysteine really fast and it comes down here. And then they get extra sulfates right down here. They get more taurine right here. They can get uric acid, they get ammonia down here. These problems can start to happen. And like I said, when changes occur in a more systemic way, it's harder to address these things. So you need to be able to address the whole person again, use your bigger macrocosmic view, address the person with botanical, nutritional, lifestyle, dietary, spiritual care, all those medicines and pharmaceuticals. If you need them, get them doing well again, calm the system down, then we can more easily address some of these problems, like the sulfur breakdown. People are just really running this CBS too fast. You'll get these problems that are downstream. Serotonin and dopamine, these are our two really important neurotransmitters. Here's the tryptophan pathway that leads to 5-HTP and then serotonin, and then the breakdown 5-HIA. Right here, here's melatonin. We talked about melatonin, how important it is, how important serotonin is for feeling good and life has meaning, right? You feel good. Serotonin's amazing. And then dopamine is like I'm good, like I feel good. I got like lots of likes on my Facebook page. Woohoo! Dopamine, right? That's like really cool. So this whole thing here is how we metabolize it. You can look at thheses and just see, here's that monoamine oxidase, right? Are you breaking down that and converting it and getting rid of it, or is it hanging around longer? Because people that get stressed out oftentimes and they have this like ongoing anxiety, a lot of times originally it feels like a protective mechanism, like imagine your daughter's on the edge of the deck and, she gets right to the edge and she almost falls off and mom reaches out and grabs her and pulls her back. Oh my God. Okay. And in that moment, it was this flood of catecholamine, right? So full like flush. Okay. Now, dad's sitting there and he's like, he had a little flush and he's like, okay, cool. 5 minutes later, like he's gone. Like, he just metabolized that. He's like, cool. All right, next thing, let's go ahead. And mom's like, I didn't metabolize that. It's just sitting there as epinephrine. I'm not running that MAO COMT pathway here. This is all just chilling. And I'm just like, no. My daughter's not getting near that edge. No, tomorrow I'm still feeling it, right? And that, there's some interesting links between estrogen and how estrogen actually inhibits these pathways as a way of helping to maintain the presence on the risk of danger versus testosterone, which actually speeds these up. So that, and I think it goes back to just, sort of shared protection within a community or a family, how we relate to, risk and benefit.
To get into the set. Ways.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally. Just say the latest saying, gosh, I really wish we could just, keep that in mind and be safe. Yeah.
So it's very, but because I felt.
I mean that like with the estrogens, that these pathways, COMT and MAO, tend to be slower as a way to maintain the perspective that there's risk and danger.
Well, you thought with it, and that was starting to kid walks out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And I mean, in Hypericum, the data that keeps coming out of Hypericum perforatum, I mean, that plant, and actually we just learned about Hypericum punctatum, right, which is here with Doug, the local Hypericum, but the molecules, hypericin, hyperforin, there's something about them with their relationship with serotonin that they greatly increase our serotonin bioavailability, and the outcomes are amazing, not just for depression and anxiety, but like you said, for cognitive, impairment, like for protection, for cognitive enhancement and protection long term. But so I don't want to belabor those points. These are the enzymes that break down a lot of the drugs and things that we take in. They break down different types of compounds that we bring into our body, right? And there's things like 1A2, 2D6, 2C9, 2C19. These are things that, over time, if you're working in this field, especially when you're working with chemotherapy drugs and herbs and things, you kind of get to know some of these pathways. Well, how is this drug metabolized primarily through which pathway? And then how does that relate to this person? You can find problems in there. You can find SNPs that people can have that can put them at risk of not being able to break down a drug or of metabolizing it into its active drug too quickly, right? An interesting example is artemisinin, which we use a lot in medicine, especially with cancer, is that artemisinin induces the enzyme that breaks itself down. So I think it's 2C19 actually, but it induces 2C19, which then speeds up how fast your body metabolizes it. Now that's why we cycle it on and off. We'll have people take artemisinin for a few days on, like 7 days on, and then we have them stop it. Let that enzyme cool off again. Because as they take it, they're increasing their ability to metabolize it. So you need more and more of it to get the same blood level. So then we do a cycle where we stop it and then we bring it back on again. So there's interesting induction of enzymes and there's inhibition of enzymes. Drugs, right? They can induce it or they can alter its expression. Polymorphisms can result in ineffective or aberrant activation of prodrugs. One of the main CYP3A4 inhibitors that we have dietarily, you may know, grapefruit juice. Grapefruit, right? People that are on chemotherapy or going through, treatment for strokes, or if they're on anti-seizure drugs or things like that, people say, hey, don't do this with grapefruit juice. Don't take any grapefruit juice. And the reason is because grapefruit juice inhibits the 3A4 pathway. Hypericum upregulates 3A4. Hypericum speeds up the metabolism. It helps you more rapidly detoxify toxins, right? But that can be a problem if you're trying to keep drug levels to a certain place, and then the body starts to get rid of them more quickly. It may not be a problem necessarily at the level of what it's doing for you, but if you wanted to measure the level of that drug in the body, it will be lower if you take hypericum with that drug. You know what I'm saying? The research is very hard to interpret, but if you look at it really in depth, you find that a lot of this idea about drug-herb interactions, like hypericum and the problems that it causes, it's not actually showing us that it causes a problem. It's showing us that theoretically, it's changing levels of a drug. But what does that mean? We don't know. The studies don't actually go that far. They only go as far as to theorize that there's probably some change in the amount of the drug available. Whether or not that makes a better outcome or a worse outcome, that has not been studied.
The confuse what the your experience. It's very much down. It's there.
3A4. Yeah, that's the main. That's CYP450. These are all CYP450s right here. Yeah. Yep. And there's, this is this is phase 1 liver detoxification.
So what I want with is it either that we treat like how much is it? Is it six or is there all in a this how you think like you touch it rash what's that?
Well, the thing about drug interactions is that there's pharmacokinetics, right? How is the drug taken up by the body? How much is available? Then there's pharmacodynamics. What does the body do? How does the body act on the drug? And then there's also a whole other layer of genetics that we don't even understand, which is how the drug actually affects that individual. And so when you think about the drug interactions, it's just that our data that we have only goes to the first step. That's it. There's very little that goes beyond that. And if you see the research that we have that looks at how drugs and herbs interact, almost all of the research shows that the primary effect is synergy. Yeah. So, and then especially if you start applying herbs with people that have a training, like doctors of Chinese medicine, applying herbs to the patient's constitutional type based on the materials to the person, the outcomes start to become a lot better. When you're doing chemotherapy, radiation with herbal formulas, the more tailored it is in some of the big studies, the better the outcomes are. So again, we have to look at it, in a different way. And just so you understand, this is phase 1 on the left, phase 2 on the right. And remember, phase 1, if it outpaces phase 2, that's a problem. You need to be able to quench and conjugate whatever's going through this first step it's getting oxidized and it becomes an intermediary metabolite. And in that state where it's been oxidized, a toxin or hormone, it becomes something that can very well be a lot more dangerous than the thing it was to begin with. So if you don't finish up with this, acetylation, glucuronidation, using your glutathione, right? Conjugation, methylation, sulfation, if this doesn't work in conjunction with this, or if this is faster than this, these things start to have a lot of negative effects on your body. That's why we work so hard on this side. And the reason I bring this up is because this is the essence side. This is our essence that works to cool and quench and maintain control of, what was that last slide? Here it is. Yeah. This side keeps this stuff from doing damage. It's that, like I said, putting out the fires. Reactive oxygen intermediaries. So here's the comps, COM2 and MAO, like I said, right? The metabolism of the catecholamines creates this stuff. So this is kind of like, a modern way. I like this cool thing here. You can see here, foods which increase catecholamines. It's got coffee, tea, bananas, chocolate, citrus fruit, vanilla. And again, everybody's different, right? People have the SNP that they metabolize caffeine fast or rapid metabolizers, or they metabolize it moderately, or they metabolize it slowly. And some people that have the slow metabolizer SNP for caffeine, and if they're also having sensitivities due to lots of other factors, they'll drink some caffeine at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. They can't sleep at night. It doesn't go away. Other people, they're rapid metabolizers. They drink a cup of coffee and they're like, done, go to bed. Same thing with alcohol, blood alcohol levels. You could check the little, checker. You have 2 different people drinking the same amount of alcohol. One person's like, there's 0.025. The other person's at, 0.1. They drink the same amount. Why? Metabolism. It has to do with the way that we metabolize different material. Love this picture of this woman. It's so beautiful. But stress, essence, genetics, and aging, right? It's critical to understand the components of nature and nurture and their relative magnitude, how they contribute to healthy aging. Yeah. That's the long earlobe. Yeah. Earlobes were definitely a sign in Taoist thought that you had more essence. And that gets back to the kidney and the ears, right? That's that whole development. So here we have heritability estimates of longevity suggests that about a third of the phenotypic variation associated with the trait is attributable to genetic factors, and the rest is influenced by epigenes and environmental factors. We have a lot that we can do, guys. We can do a lot to change how people age or how they don't, how well they do, I should say. Senescence, this is the topic Donnie's talking about today, right? Decreased adaptability to stress. And this is about adaptation, age-related alterations in brain function in the limbic system, like you were just talking about, exert an inhibitory influence on the activity of the HPA axis, right? And the HPA axis is this neuroendocrine system in our bodies. This is where our adaptogens work. And they work in this very general way to normalize function, right? They're non-specific. They're non-toxic. They're normalizing. They help maintain balance when there's stress so that we don't start to break down. And that's why we're going to talk about how the adaptogens, and some of them particularly, are really good at helping to hold our essence. Glucocorticoids, right? As well as sensitivity of the production of, and not just glucocorticoids, as well as the sensitivity of bone cells to glucocorticoids increases with age. We become more sensitive to that stress output, the breakdown, the catabolic part of getting stressed out. Like you're saying, every day, building up and breaking down. Everything's building up and breaking down. When one outpaces the other, we have problems, right? We don't want to grow too fast without breaking ourselves down. We've got to make space for new. We also don't want to break down too fast. And as we age, we generally start to break down faster than we can build up. The bones start to get weaker. We can't build them as fast as they're breaking down. The nerves start to break down faster than we can build them. That's a yin and yang balance thing. That's what we're talking about. This is essence again. The turnover of mitochondria declines, decreased ATP synthesis, more reactive oxygen species, more mitochondrial damage, age spot, right? Lipofuscin. We start to see that. That's another sign that we're not adapting. We're not able to quench the free radicals. They're building up. They're coming up in our skin. Increase the efficiency of cellular pathways to improve energy production, and then also increase removal of the cellular garbage. And like I've said so many times in my lectures in the last few years, most of the diseases of aging are a buildup of stuff. Most of our chronic disease is more stuff in our bodies. And like I said, it can be, Dow proteins, beta amyloid, it can be neurofibrous tangles, it can be, heavy metals that build up, it can be mold toxins, environmental toxins that build up in our cells. There's so many things that build up as stuff. And I always go back to the analogy too, like, look at how we live in our lives. We're packing stuff. We've got a garage, we've got a closet, we've got an attic, we've got, we just keep putting more stuff in our world, in our life, right? It's not good. When we get stuck with stuff, we become stagnant. Energy doesn't flow anymore. And then we have disease. So sell your stuff. It's not easy. Move it on. Yeah, get it. Yeah, except for the instruments. Yeah. I like it. Here's this woman, Jean Calment of Arles, France, like 102-year-old. She was like the oldest living woman there for a while, 122 years old. And they talk about how here, I didn't try to do that. Beautiful young people are accidents in nature, but beautiful old people are works of art. There's something like, what is it that makes these certain people live extremely long, where the rest of, the average American lives 76 to 79 years old? We're only as healthy as the environment that surrounds us, right? That guy didn't look too healthy. That's America, right? The blue zones, right? Environmental factors, developmental plasticity, right? So there's something happening in these blue zones where people live longer. Well, what is it? What is happening? These are regions where the population shares a common lifestyle and environment and whose exceptional longevity has been accurately verified. Okinawa, Nicoya, Costa Rica, Icaria, Sardinia, Loma Linda, California, right? Japan, Costa Rica, Greece. So these are places where people are doing something that they live longer. What is it? Distinct lifestyle, greater intake of vegetables, stress-free and active lifestyle. Here I am talking to you guys. You're sitting here for 90 minutes, just sitting here, not doing anything. Woohoo, I'm helping. Community bond and spirituality. That's really important. That's this stuff up here, right? Bonded to something. There's something bigger that you're a part of. Many more distinct lifestyle choices that are part of generating a healthy and long life. Swimming in the ocean, doing things together, eating together, sharing, right? I think as much as what we eat is how we eat. Are we present with our food? Are we present with our friends and our people? And I've got another whole talk that's about kind of serotonin and how the microbes, 95% of our serotonin is made in the gut. So the microbes actually produce the serotonin that we're able to take up from our mesenteric nervous system up into our brain via the vagal afferent fiber. So the microbes are making the serotonin that then make us feel like we're doing the right thing. I'm feeling good. I'm with my people. Well, I got to this realization, and some of the researchers did too, that, let's see, so if we're made up of mostly microbe DNA, it's like there's 100 times as much microbe DNA in our bodies as us. I'm actually walking around as like this human biont. I'm really like a conglomeration of lots of different things that all are kind of together, orchestrated into this me. Well, then who's actually asking me to get together with these other people and hang out with them? Well, the microbes want to interact. They want to share and exchange, and they want to be together. So when I eat some food that makes my bugs, feel like, hey, you gave me the right stuff, well, they'll make me some serotonin and some dopamine, and I'll want to hang out with my friends and drink wine and hang out together, right? So they're actually having an interaction, bringing us together. And I think in that social community brain, the social brain part, is a lot of it is the microbes and their interaction, their life, and how they're all having this experience through us. And that's just a whole nother can of worms, but fun stuff to think about. Here's the hallmarks of aging. These are the things that happen at this level. Like, if this is all like, again, essence breakdown. We can look at essence deficiency, but if you look at it from this concept of genetics, instability of the genes, right? The fidelity, the sound isn't clear, the image isn't right. The attrition of the telomere, the ends of the genetic material start to break down. We don't have enough to make the full copy. Epigenetic alterations, like the histones getting too compressed or not compressed enough. The loss of protein stability. Proteins are breaking down in the body. Nutrient sensing, like we're going to talk about AMPK and mTOR, right? Like how we either are going to go to growth phase and grow, or we're going to go into like non-growth phase of protection. When resources are scarce, we go into a resting phase. Mitochondrial dysfunction, the aging of cells, exhaustion of stem cells, can't make new us, altered communication, and the accumulation of genetic damage throughout life. Remember back to the slide on essence deficiency, what I said were like the key symptoms of essence deficiency. Well, here we have aging characteristics, right? Graying of hair, wrinkled skin. Hey, you gain wisdom. That's a cool one. Natural process death, right? Not evil, not a disease. Hearing loss, kidneys open into the ears, right? Y'all know that. If you're TCM people, you know that. And these connections between the organ and the sensory organ that they manifest in is really strong. Liver in the eyes, kidneys in the ear, really strong. It's got heart in the tongue, right? You speak your truth, your shen. Decreased reproduction, cataracts and macular degeneration, retinal detachment, these diseases of the eye where you see that the oxidative damage is causing more damage than the body can cope with, and it's leading to breakdown of the tissues, especially the little microcapillaries and things. That's all this essence decline. We don't have the capacity to quench those free radicals. We're not keeping control of the little fires. They're breaking down our material. That's what cataracts are, scarring from that process. Aging characteristics, all the diseases, right, associated, Alzheimer's, cancer, sarcopenia, the loss of muscle mass, right, frailty, diabetes, osteoporosis. So here's Schizandra, which is a really cool adaptogen. And this statement here, the evolution of the adaptogenic concept has led back to the basics of traditional medical systems and a new level of understanding of holistic approach. Eleutherococcus, right? We always talk about ginseng as like this amazing adaptogen, Panax ginseng, and it is. And it's always been this really incredible plant medicine for us, very helpful, very protective. But it was a little bit warm for some people. It's very expensive compared to some other things. So the Russian researchers that were looking at how this stuff worked, the level of adaptogens and hormesis and protection, found Eleuthero, which is an herb in Chinese medicine already, but they found it to be very helpful as a neutral herb that had a nice general normalizing effect on the body. So it's considered the king of the adaptogens because it represents this capacity to protect the body in all these different ways. And the way that the research was done initially on this was they did these long studies with people in places like, in education, in factories, in astronomics, people in military, and they were trying to find ways to keep people focused, keep them awake and able to function at a high level without having them crash. Because they tried all the things like cocaine and methamphetamine, any kind of stimulant, and there was always a downside. Just like people would just crash. So they were like, well, how do we do this? How do we get people to focus and work better at what they do? And they found this was the stuff. They would literally, for 5 and 10 years, they'd take data at regular intervals on people. They would have a control group and a test group. You'd get into work, you'd take 5 milliliters of Eleuthero. And you'd leave work, take 5 milliliters of Eleuthero. And they'd see how many days were you sick? How many days, how productive were you? Were you depressed? They had these whole different lifestyle thing, and they looked at it, and the results were amazing. And what happened was over time, the results were better and better and better. So the longer you took the adaptogenic formula or the Eleuthero, for example, the better the results were. And we often wonder, like, do I want to take something every day? I don't want to take something every day. Well, plants are different. They're hundreds and hundreds of molecules. It's different than taking a molecule every day. Very different. A plant, and especially when you're talking about TCM, we talk about formulas. You're talking about hundreds of molecules in each plant, and then you're putting together 8 or 9 or 12 plants. Now you might have 10,000 molecules. That's a whole different story than, like, I gave you 2 drugs. They don't even compare.
That little sense,
Schizandra. Yeah, the last one was Schizandra. Just an idea. This is Eleutherococcus senticosus. Those were in Russia. Russia really did the big adaptogen research. Some of the stuff that they found with Eleuthero, right, decreases adrenal hypertrophy. The adrenal glands generally kind of start to swell in response to this really big demand, but that swell actually isn't very effective. And over time, it results in a crash. So we get to the full adrenal fatigue picture. But the adrenal gland hypertrophy is because it's trying to make more stress hormones to meet demand. And Eleuthero helps. It says, I'll take care of that, some of that stress response that you're trying to make with the adrenal gland. We'll control some of that. You don't have to put out so much. You don't have to grow bigger to try and match. Spares vitamin C loss, all these different places, right? Fatigability, color differentiation, visual and hearing, thinking association, lack of side effects and toxicity. Here's ginseng, right? I talked to you on Friday about the source chi. That's the place where the essence becomes the active form of chi. Essence is turning into material to become us. It's also becoming the active form, the energy that we use. And so ginseng is the only plant, at least as we know in Chinese medicine conceptual thinking, that it tonifies the source chi, that place where the chi is just coming out of it. Really powerful. Yeah. In the Mingman. Right. So that's where essence becomes chi, right? The chi is life force, the ability to do things. Look, it tonifies the lung, the heart, the spleen and stomach, generates body fluids. So it has a yin aspect as well. impotence, increases wisdom. I always love that. That's like this really cool action. No other plant has that. Like that's ginseng's really special. Mental performance, poor concentration, anti-aging tonic. The Taoist concept is often to just take ginseng after 35 every day. Just take it. Just start taking it. High blood pressure. That's why some people have the sensitivity to the heat. That's why the Eleutherococcus is the one.
Yeah, hey,
Yeah, we'll hit American ginseng as another option because it is warming. And so when you understand natures of things hot and cold, you can apply them to people more accurately, right? Like if someone has a constitution that's cold, you don't want to give them a bunch of cold herbs. That'll just make them worse. You have to balance things out. Essence is like literally the untangible or intangible material that you were given at birth that makes you every day. It's also the material that once you've extracted from your food that you take in or from your emotional experience or from the air, the product, when you distill that down through the process of hydrochloric acid, break down the big macromolecules into smaller ones, then you go into the duodenum and use duodenal enzymes to refine it. Then you have the pancreas, you're refining it even smaller. Then you pull that in. That's like nutritive chi. And then that becomes a way to support your body from using the essence that it has stored. Because essence will first become all those little tiny little bits that you need to make you. So it's basically like chi is the thing that directs the function. Chi is the energy. That's why I would say like ATP is like the currency of chi. Like I can store essence, but I can't store energy. I'm going to make energy. I'm going to take fuel. I'm going to burn it. And that's going to give me energy to be able to walk around and do stuff and talk. Essence is what gives me this structure, my tissue, why I'm here. A strong constitutional person, you could say they have a lot of essence. Yep. Big constitution, a lot of essence. Prevents neural loss. And then like this, like you just said, American ginseng, right? For people that do have that hot constitution, people have hypertension, people tend to be red in the face and excited and angry and things like that. They're not so good with the ginseng. So that's where you go to something like American ginseng, which is actually cool in its nature, but has a lot of the same thing. Ginsenoside bonifies the chi, right? Which chi, to think of it as like mitochondrial efficiency. I talk about the membranes in the mitochondria and the fluidity of them, the proton gradient that allows this exchange of energy in the mitochondria that we use to be able to produce the drive for us to be able to move around and do things and think. That's the chi. And so in order to enhance the chi tonics do that, like this, American ginseng. Also generates fluid, so it has that yin aspect too, just like ginseng. Supports the stomach, nourishes the yin, benefits the lung yin, clears fire from the lungs. So it has this cooling nature, American ginseng, while it's also being supportive. And these are not stimulants. These are not herbs that stimulate you. They're not like caffeine. They don't do that. They're actually deeply supportive. Oh yeah? They want American ginseng in China? Yeah. Well, I find that having both sides of it's really good. Having the yin and the yang, the American ginseng and then the Panax is really good. And there is, of course, white Panax ginseng, which is less hot. But this is a Rasayana ashwagandha or Withania somnivera. It's neutral in its nature. It supports essence, chi, and blood, and kidney space. So it's really useful. If you look at the stuff with ashwagandha, I mean, it's really rarely not a good plant for somebody, right? And that's the thing about the primary adaptogens is that they're generally good for just about everybody. Anybody can take them, right? I don't want to give ginseng to a kid generally because kids are all young. They're literally like hot. So they get a fever, bam, they're like 104 immediately. It burns to it. They don't need heat. Most of the kids, like especially like, kids that are 13 and 14, boys that come to me with problems with ADD and stuff like that, I want to cool them off. I'll give them like a liver moving formula and some like herbs to cool, some anamarina, some gardenia flower, and then like soothe their liver, calm them down. They do much better. I don't want to give them ginseng. But then again, there's kids that are failing to thrive, like a premature baby who just never quite had enough, and they're just not quite growing at the rate other people are. That's a great place to give them ginseng. It's never like this is the way to do it and this isn't the way. It's always about tailoring the approach to understanding the perspective of the person, what they need in their moment, and what materials you can use to support them. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, a lot of these herbs that are supportive, like ashwagandha, and the thing about it is it's anxiolytic, right? An antidepressant, but it doesn't actually like sedate you. It's not a sedative. It more like just, again, through that stress response adaptation, it calms the system down, makes it easier to handle stresses. but it doesn't like put you to sleep. Kava has more of an anxiolytic and a sedative effect with those kava lactones. It can actually start to kind of like sedate you. CBD can be sedative at a certain dose. You get the dose high enough, but it doesn't work that way. But look at the stuff that it does. I mean, promotes physical, mental health, resists diseases. It's got the withanolides, the withaferins, regenerates neurites, reconstructs synapses, increases acetylcholine activity. And of course, acetylcholine breakdown is one of the things that we've associated with Alzheimer's, right? That's where we have these acetylcholinesterase inhibitors, right? These drugs that are trying to basically stop the breakdown of acetylcholine. But you can see here, it doesn't have like the acetylcholine inhibition like something like the Huperzia does, right? The huperzine, which is a real specific one, but it does in its own way, in that more complex bioregulatory way, it does that. It improves acetylcholine receptor efficiency and improves the maintaining of acetylcholine, not letting it break down. Enhances cognition and memory. So P53, I mentioned, this is that guardian of the genome, right? If you don't have this gene working, then you're in trouble. And I bring this up because there's this CRISPR technology that they worked on for a while, right? CRISPR is basically like this, and what it is, it's a double strand break. So they go into a genetic sequence and they can actually go in and cut a gene out of the sequence and replace it with something else. That's the idea, right? This is how we're going to make mosquitoes that can't reproduce, or we're going to make apples that don't oxidize, when they're opened. That's kind of like these kind of ideas, right? The thing about it is, and the bigger idea is, well, let's take out the gene that codes for this disease in a person. We'll just remove that gene and replace it, and then that person won't have that disease. The problem is that if you have a double strand break in a DNA replication process, the P53 gene should say, no, don't replicate this. This is a problem. This is not right. If it doesn't work, then that replicated cell has a faulty P53. So what you just created was a huge risk for cancer in whatever that organism was that you just produced the CRISPR result. When that became a reality, when that got realized, all these billions and millions of dollars of investors were like, oh my God, we need to figure out how to do this differently. And so now they're trying to do a single break. It's like we're pushing the edge of the envelope of what's possible, right? And we start to run into big problems. And I wanted you guys to understand P53 from that perspective because it's really important. P53 protection, there's a bunch of herbs that protect us from its breakdown.
This is all the foreign country, you can stay in a target that able to
Yeah, exactly. Right. They can change. You can change attributes of an individual using the CRISPR technology, like eye color, things like that. Yeah. But the problem is that you're pushing this other result of having P53 mutations.
I feel I think what we want now that I did see this was so
yep.
That system. So that that you can sell more deals
we just need to find a way to do it without ensuring that P53 mutations will continue, because that kid got helped in that one way, but then the risk is about 50% chance of cancer. So that's not a risk that's worth taking at this point. We need to figure out how to do it differently. It's a great concept, yeah. But I want you to understand how important P53 is, right? Stress, chronic infection, insulin resistance leads to P53 breakdown, and then you lose all the stuff that we need, right? And here's pleiotropic plant compounds enhance the health of and/or repair P53. So we can work with our plants. And the reason I talk about essence again is that this is this level of essence where we're like in genetics, right? Where we're like, we have to be able to repair the genes throughout the process of our life and prevent the scratches, prevent the breakdown. So it's the same DNA replication as much as possible for us to become ourselves every day, unless it's a positive change, of course, that we're trying to make. P21 is just downstream of P27. These are other genes. You'll see these in the data, the research. These get mutated also and lead to changes. Induction of apoptosis that you were talking about, how important it is to have upregulation of apoptosis so that it works, so that your cells are able to die in their normal way, and then you have new cells that come back. When apoptosis doesn't work, this is a big part of cancer. P53 controls that. And NF-kappa beta is one of that big master inflammatory switches that drives growth, inflammation, proliferation, and survival. So P53 and NF-kappa beta inhibit each other. So we want to turn down that inflammatory signal that drives that aberrant growth by controlling it with P53 upregulation. So here's a list of botanical agents that have a lot of data on them for inhibiting p53 mutation and supporting the p53 gene to make its protein, the p53 protein, which shuts down the genetic sequence from replicating. You guys make that make sense? If you want to stop an aberrant gene from replicating, you need to have p53 functional. Grapeseed extract, the oligomeric polyphenolic compounds, and just polyphenols in general from all of our plants. Just bathe the body in polyphenols and flavonoids all the time. Just keep it coming. That's why you need vegetables. So much of our focus is on what we shouldn't eat, but in reality, we just need to make sure we're getting in the plants that are going to nourish us and do this stuff, turn on these key parts of our physiology. We need to keep on making sure we get them in. Quercetin, resveratrol, activates p53, turmeric and curcumin, Trametes versicolor. We talked about this yesterday, right? Reishi, one of my favorite all-time mushrooms. Or Trametes is, turkey tail. And then Ganoderma, right? Both of them affecting p53. Green tea and epigallocatechin gallate. I mean, we know that shows up everywhere. EGCG and green tea is amazing. It's like a gift from heaven. No question. Ginsenoside from ginseng, Scutellaria with the bicolin and bicoline, Wugonin, Rhabdosia rubescens. That's Dongling Tao in Chinese medicine. Silibinin from Silymarin, right? Which is of course milk thistle. All of these. And you think about milk thistle, it's protection, right? Protection from breakdown. Yeah. Silibinin, the last one there. Oh, Rhabdosia, Dongling Tao. It's a Rhabdosia rubescens. It's an herb that clears heat toxins. Here's references, more references, more references. So you can have those. So, people are always wondering, like, why would you want to give me this stuff? Because look, here it is. Not only is it traditionally, I can predict based on your constitution that this would help, but I can also give you the data that says, hey, people have researched this and it works. So we want to have both of those. Here's our diet, Western diet, mutates p53. Why? Well, you get this big glycemic load, right? And remember, there's a glycemic index, which is how much sugar is in a thing. Glycemic load is how much sugar gets delivered to the body quickly from that thing. Like a carrot has a high glycemic index, but a carrot itself has a low glycemic load. If you juice the carrot and you drink it, it has a high glycemic load because you don't have fibers and lignans and the sugars are all nestled into it. It just comes in as like one burst of sugar. When you have cancer or another insulin-related disease, you don't want to do that. You don't want to be taking juices that are high in sugars and getting you high blood sugars, then you get big insulin releases and you get the problem hitting. Fast foods, trans fatty acids, high in red meat. And I would say that probably the red meat thing, small amounts of red meat in the right context, don't overcook them. They should be organic and free range. I mean, we've always eaten animals. If you don't eat animals, wonderful. If you do, just do it in the right way. And I don't think that this is going to be a big problem for you. If you start eating meat that's, cage feeding lots and it's just junk meat, terrible, you're going to have problems. It's like pop, right? Processed foods, alcohol consumption, sugary beverages, and quality. Quality. That's the key thing with your food. And exercise is hugely beneficial and will actually counteract a lot of the negativity that happens. 150 minutes of moderate to high intensity exercise a week. That's the goal, basically. The studies that used that as a benchmark showed that you could overcome a lot of these problems from toxicity from diet, alcohol, things like that, with exercise. Nutrigenomics. Food is information, right? Food is information. It's informing our genes. We are getting information about the world we live in always from what we take in. And it's the signaling cues. I mean, we even found that plants secrete molecules, xenohormesis, that tell us about changes that are coming in the environment to prepare our bodies to deal with those. Drought, storms, changes in the climate. Nutri-epigenomics, right? This is just where we're looking at dietary influence of food on epigenetics. Same kind of story, just that we're looking at how foods alter epigenomics. And here's where we talk about genetics and genomics. Nutrigenomics is the relationship between nutrition and gene expression, the effect of diet on metabolism. And nutrigenetics is the interaction between genes, diet, and lifestyle, or the influence of the genotype, those inherited genetic variants, and their impact on the nutritionally related diseases. So two different, slightly different things, but definitely have two different sides of this coin, but both influence each other. And in the middle, you have personalized nutrition, or you want to put it all together. This is just something for you to have. This is like one of my favorite little handouts for patients when it comes down to kidney essence deficiency and how we can help say, hey, look, here's some really good foods Really good things you can do to support essence when you're feeling like that's something that's breaking down. Either we're aging, we have diseases that have weakened our ability to quench and soothe and nourish our tissues.
The whole thing is all right.
Right there. That's it right there. Just you already have it. Just take that, give it to your patients. You got it. That's what I did on Friday. I had this. I was like, here, spleen deficiency. Here's how you do it. Here's all the instructions. It's all right there. So, good roadmap to start with anyway. Calorie restriction, right? This is really important. These two places I talk about, mTOR, mammalian target of rapamycin. This says grow, grow, grow. Cancer loves this pathway. Pick 3. Here's AMPK, adenosine monophosphate kinase. This one right here says, no, we're not going to grow. We're actually going to go into this growth inhibition phase. We're going to chill and wait till the storms pass. And then when it's nice again and we have resources and food and everything, then we can go back to reproduction. But if you keep doing this in situations that are highly stressful, you break down really fast. So we want to inhibit mTOR. We want to upregulate AMPK. Pick 3. These are called transcription pathways. A big thing in cancer for us. But they're all like how the body basically goes through this nutrient sensing and use of growth pathways versus resting pathways and protection. Sirtuin, big part of this also. Genes that have been around forever, the beginning of time, that protected replicating proteins from dying when big changes happen ecologically on Earth. It's part of the idea is that it's what kept us alive, what kept life from being destroyed in this magic soup of lightning and God and all the things that brought life to be. The sirtuins protected us by keeping us safe during times of famine. Herbs to nourish essence. Yeah. Sure. Well, with the calorie restriction right here, right? When you reduce the thyroid or you reduce the calories that you're taking in, one of the things that happens is adiponectin is a really important fat cell hormone that will help us to reduce our insulin levels and glucose levels. Caloric restriction up here with thyroid. When you look at thyroid, what happens is as you increase insulin levels, when you take in food, you have elevated glucose, elevated insulin, you'll start to store that fuel as fat. Fat cells then release compounds that inhibit the thyroid, because if the thyroid is running fast, what happens is you metabolize really quickly and you burn fuels instead of storing them. When you take away the calories, you want to turn down the thyroid because I don't want to burn things. Now I want to store things when you're fasting, right? You go into autophagy, you start using what resources you have, you start digging through, the stores to start keeping going, right? With thyroid, it's estrogen will drive the thyroid down because estrogen wants you to go into storage mode. I want to be at home. I want to take care of everything. I want to have some extra. I want to be prepared for the future when there might be a famine. The other side of it is, hey, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to burn. I want to get out there. I want to do stuff. I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to just, you get really lean, right? So the two sides of it, the thyroid will start to make you really lean if it's high, and it'll make you really, obese if it's low. And so caloric restriction in the short term will prevent you from metabolizing too quickly. You'll start to slow down. You'll just be using the stuff you have as resources, not taking it like, hey, I need to burn more fuel. You can't do that because you're not taking in fuel. Herbs to nourish essence. Rhamania glutinosa. This is one of the primary ones. It's a yellow earth, or shu di, and this is basically yellow earth. And there's the raw form, the shungdi, and then the prepared form, shu di, where it's prepared. It's all these they prepare it with vinegar and cook it into this way where it comes this it's like a black, really dark. And all this essence stuff is normally dark color, black color, like the unknown, like the deep, like the ocean, like this dark black kidney essence is really from the unknown kind of coming out into the light. And so when you're nourishing with essence, nourishing plants, oftentimes they're really dark like that. And you have to be careful because they can be sticky, cloying, rich. So you have to make sure that they're not too rich. This one's very rich, so you have to combine it with things that help people digest it. This is one of my favorite herbs, Hoshiwu, right? Oti, William multiform, wonderful herb we're going to talk about. Nujunza, Hamyeonsao, Ligustrum, and Eclipta. These two are very special in Chinese medicine. They nourish the essence without being cloying. Tianbindong, this is the wild asparagus. Chusutsa, the cascada seed. Cordyceps mushroom, of all the mushrooms, cordyceps is the one that's most essence nourishing. Gets down to that kidney level. Also has the yang aspect that it codifies. And then Schizandra astringes the essence, not nourishes it like OT will actually nourish the essence. It's one of the few things that actually gives you a little bit of essence. This has a long history, this elixir of life, all these stories about Hushu Wu and its ability to preserve essence and give people a little bit of essence over the course of their life. You need to take it long term and keep it going. But it improves quality of blood, hair, and teeth, a reproductive tonic, right? Here's the thing that we've seen in the modern research. It detoxifies neurotoxins, scavenges free radicals, acetylcholinesterase, lipid modulating, AD, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, vascular dementia, regulate apoptosis again. Such an important piece, right? Brain protective, improves learning and memory in the elderly. Such a great plant. This group of compounds, tetrahydroxystylbeing glucoside, these are like amazing. They do such incredible work at that level of essence and protection, protecting the cell, protecting the essence, protecting the DNA and the genetics from breaking down and losing fidelity. Prevents learning memory deficit in Alzheimer's disease-like models, reverses learning memory deficit. And again, with these compounds, where you think, you just want to make sure it's there. I want to know that this is there. I don't care if it's a 10-1 or a 30-1. I want to make sure that this molecule, which is a molecule that shows up when this plant is stressed out and is trying to deal with its own, pressures in its environment, it makes this molecule to protect itself. That's the one that we want. The plants have to be stressed out to make the molecules, the resveratrol, the pterostilbene, the hydroxystylbeing glucosides. If the plants aren't stressed, they won't make these molecules and they won't be medicine. Yeah, you've got to make sure that whatever company you're using has a very good, toxin reduction strategy. Most of the companies will have a whole set of pages on their website that says, here's what we do to test for all the different things. That's why you can't just go out there and randomly buy things. You have to make sure that it's really strongly tested. The people that I like to work with have companies that work at least 100 kilometers away from any kind of a facility that would be producing toxins or smog. And then, of course, they have really rigorous testing. And even just the GMP certification as a starting point is really hard to get. It's a very elaborate and lengthy process to get GMP certification. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I'm all over it. I got clocks everywhere. Yeah. Nothing I can do. I'm just going to keep going. Yeah. Cloying concepts, like the cloying idea, right? If it's too cloying, you give someone essence tonics, but they can't digest it, they get more sticky and gooey. That doesn't work. So you have to clear out their digestion first. You have to make sure that they have not too much dampness, not too much deficiency. They need to be able to digest what you're giving them. So oftentimes with an essence tonic formula, you combine it with aromatic herbs that improve digestion, make the microbiota more healthy so they can absorb these more nourishing plants. Argyrowan, the two ultimate pillars is ligustrum and eclipta. These two herbs are so cool because they nourish essence without being sticky and cloying. And they're really interesting. They should actually be called the two solstices because they're harvested. Ligustrum, you can see here, is harvested deep at the winter solstice and eclipta at the summer solstice. They have to be harvested at those times to be able to give you this combination of essence nourishing effect. And that's what's just, there's so much depth to this ancient knowledge. So astringing essence is really cool. And one thing that I heard Lise talk about yesterday in the panel was that, hey, antioxidants aren't actually antioxidants. That's how they do. They don't run around stopping oxidation. They actually, what they do, these plants that we talk about now as antioxidants, what they do is they actually induce a low grade of oxidative stress on our cells, which then induces our mitochondria to get better at handling stress. And they have molecules that enhance the mitochondria's ability to adapt to the stress. So it's actually not this, I'm going to go out there, I'm going to take this thing and it's going to quench free radicals. No, these things like these adaptogens, the herbs, they're going to actually make you better at quenching free radicals. That's what's so cool about them. And that's that yin essence tonification element. Astringing herbs, the ones that hold the essence that you have so you don't lose it. And that's, again, quenching these free radicals. Mueta, Cornus officinalis. These are sour things, right? Astringent things. Rose, Jinlingza, Shansher, I love this, Uriali. Stabilizes the kidneys and astringes essence. It also is really good for diarrhea. So people aren't losing their essence. So people have diarrhea, they get really electrolyte imbalances, they lose nutrients. You can't have somebody having a lot of diarrhea over time. They'll start to lose their essence. You got to hold it together. Astringent. Lian Shu, you can see right here, our lotus plant, such a beautiful plant. And then this one's Soralia, really good one too for the aging, for diarrhea, for urine problems. Stabilizes the essence. So you want to not only nourish the essence, but then astringe it. And astringing the essence, hold it in people's bodies. The kind of classic one is Schisandra, 5 favorite flavor fruit, has all the 5 flavors in it. Fortifies the mitochondrial antioxidant status. That's what I'm saying. It actually makes the mitochondria better at doing the job of making sure that the energy metabolism and manufacture doesn't result in a meltdown of the plant you're making energy in. It's like having a wood stove in your fire. You can't put it in the middle of the room and just have the fire burn. Your house will burn down. You got to put it inside of a really well insulated, fire box that then translates that into heat, right? That's what's happening in our body. Enhanced mitochondrial status, protection from toxins, hepatoprotective, renal protective, cardioprotective. I mean, so much amazing good data. Here's Schisandra, all the different places that it works. Look at this, neuroprotection. I put Schisandra in almost all my adaptogenic formulas. I just use a smaller amount of it because it's really sour. It's like kind of really, it's really astringent. So you don't want too much of it, but just the right amount. Yes.
How can you tell?
It depends on what you're doing. So there are the seeds inside of the fruit, which are the richest they have the richest Schisandrins in them, actually in the seeds. And the berries are really nice. They have all that kind of, like blueberries and things, a little more potent, where there's like anthocyanidins, all these molecules that are really good quenchers and support. So, with a dose of like a whole herb, anywhere from let's say on a daily dose, like if you're doing like a whole herb formula, 6 to 12 grams a day of Schisandra as a whole berry in a formula, it could be 10% of your formula. It's a really nice place to go, 5 to 10% with an adaptogen formula. And then a granule formula, same kind of thing, 5 to 10% of the formula. Here's some research for you. And this is almost done at the very, very end here. Just take a look at this. These are polyphenol all-stars. All of these polyphenol compounds, like I said, bathe the body in polyphenols. Bathe it every day, everybody, all your patients, all your friends, bathe them, whether they have cancer right now or sickness or cardiovascular disease, or if you want to protect them, keep them aging gracefully, all these things. Resveratrol, right? That's Phalugilum cuspidum. That's great. That's grape seed, grape, and the grape plant. Pterostilbene, right? That's from the pterocarpus. Marsupium, curcuminoids from turmeric, catechins, green tea. There's all the blueberries, proanthocyanidins, the dark berries, ursolic acid from sage, carnosic acid from rosemary, hanokiol from magnolia with magnolol, oleorupin, that's from the olive oil, from the olive, chlorogenic acid. This is just go on and on, right? All these are just from plants. These are all these magical all-star polyphenols. Give this to your patients. Just you get to take it. Just have me get a hand out. So you go. You got the foods. Thanks for being here. Appreciate you. Yeah. And just give it to them. Express gratitude. Express gratitude. It's amazing. Like so many of us live in those cultures today. And you know what we do? Oh God, the freaking politics, the freaking banking sector, the finances. Oh God, I can't have cost of this thing, and oh my God, da, da, da. You go hang out with somebody who grew up in, deep in the heart of Africa, Liberia or something. You're like, he's like, wow, man. For me, this is like amazing. Like I came from chaos. I lived in a compound where we had walls where you put glass and metal everywhere to just try to keep yourself. You never have your car sitting on the street. Like, what are you guys gonna do? You gonna tell me you're gonna complain about all the things that are going wrong? Let's start with gratitude. First of all, say, wow, we have it so good, so thankful, right? So let's all just remember that every day. Be so thankful every day for what we have. And if you want to criticize the world for what it is, go ahead, but start with gratitude. That's what's that? Take your adaptogens. Yeah, look at this beautiful woman here. Aging remains one of the life's great unsolved riddles. More important than our lifespan is our health span. Stay healthy, everybody. Thanks for being here. Cheers, everybody. Yeah. Thank you.